middle school students. We were studying the story of Elijah and the widow of Zarephath from 1 Kings 17. Elijah had just shown up at this widow's door and asked her to give him the very last of her food. Now, if you had been that widow, I asked, would you have generously shared your last meal with some random guy who wanted to take it away from you? No way, they said. Why then would the woman have done just that? They considered the question. Maybe she was so desperate, she just felt like she didn't have any other options and it was worth a try, one said. Or maybe there was something about him that made her realize that God was up to something, another chimed in. Maybe God is up to something. This fall, the Narrative Lectionary has treated us to a treasure of stories that remind us of just how often God is up to something. From the creation to the covenant with Abraham and Sarah, from the Passover to Hannah's song, from Elijah and the widow's never-ending supply of oil to the abundant mercy shown by God to the people in the book of Jonah, God has revealed a penchant for extravagant generosity and grace. Generosity matters to God. Indeed, God was up to something then, and God is up to something now, too. Last year, a member approached me and said they thought God was up to something at Muhlenberg. They wanted to give a large gift to allow Muhlenberg to be able to live stream our worship services. We gratefully accepted and began to assemble the equipment and the people needed to make this happen. We'd hoped to be up and running by Easter, maybe Pentecost. But at the end of the second week of March, we suddenly found ourselves in a pandemic, and we had about 72 hours to set up a virtual worship experience. It felt almost like a miracle that we had what we needed to be able to do that. Through this individual's generosity, God had provided. And God continues to provide for us through extravagant generosity and grace. And like the widow and this generous donor, God continues to call us to live lives of generosity and grace. Through the widow's generosity, God's prophet and her very own son survived the drought and lived abundant lives. Through this member's generosity, thousands of people from around the region and indeed around the world have joined with Muhlenberg in worship over the past 8 months. Our generosity matters. Over the next few weeks, we'll be hearing more stories of how generosity matters in the lives of the people of Muhlenberg. I invite you during this time to consider how generosity has mattered in your own life of faith. What is God up to in your life? Take some time to reflect on those who have been generous to you and use that opportunity to give thanks to God for God's generous gifts of life, love, and mercy. In early December, we'll have estimate of giving cards available for 2021, both hard copies that we'll send out and online. And we'll ask you to fill it out and return it to the church as an act of worship, a response to God's generous provision in your own life. Prayerfully consider how you might grow in generosity over this next year. Feel free to reach out to me or Pastor Alex or Tim Wessel, our stewardship chairperson, if you'd like to talk it over with one of us. You know, by the end of that Bible study with the middle schoolers, their no ways had completely transformed into gratitude for God's provision. It was a beautiful thing as we stood in a big wide circle and all named these things that we were thankful for. And they had a real openness too, to see what God was up to in their lives. Truly, God is up to something good, and our generosity matters.